Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Masson. I'm the Director of Enterprise Security here at Darktrace. It's my pleasure today to talk to you about IT under attack, thwarting 0 days with cyber AI. Today, I have with me my colleague Marcus Fowler, our Director of Strategic Threat, and he's going to appear in about 6 slides time, and he'll say a little bit about himself then. Next slide. So please allow me to say a little bit about Darktrace ourselves as a company. We were founded in 2013. In fact, we just celebrated our 7th birthday back in January. And essentially, we're a mathematics and an AI company, and we're headquartered back in Cambridge, in the United Kingdom. We've had a lot of growth since 2013, as you can see in the slide in front of you, and we were the first to the market with artificial intelligence for cyber defense. We're also the pioneers of autonomous response technology, and as I speak to you right now, I'm pretty sure we're still the only people who can actually do that. Next slide. So let's talk about this evolving threat landscape that we see here. And what we're currently facing is something of an asymmetry between threat actors and what we're trying to defend. And when I say asymmetry, that's a fancy word that basically means it's not fair. I'll look at what we're trying to defend first of all. What we're trying to defend is becoming increasingly complicated of itself with business diversity. The threat landscape itself is very, very large and diffuse, and became even more large and diffuse last year when everyone had to move to working from home. So it's more and more difficult for us to understand where our people are, where our devices are, where our data, where our stuff is. And some of it's in the cloud, some of it's in SaaS, some of it's on-prem, some of it's at home. And it's this business complexity that's becoming increasingly difficult to defend. And at the same time, we're facing an increasingly sophisticated threat actor attacking us. Whether that's nation states with very, very extremely sophisticated low and slow attacks, ransomware gangs, or just criminal gangs in general. And so therefore, what we're trying to defend becomes more difficult to defend, while those who attack us find it easier and easier to actually attack us. And something that's adding to that complexity will be 5G when it eventually rolls out, which will actually speed up and vastly increase the scale of the attacks that we face. And lest we forget the use of offensive artificial intelligence. Now, as a company, we use AI to defend networks, have done for many, many years. But soon we can envisage threat actors themselves using AI to turbocharge and boost the attacks against us. And speaking of IoT attacks, on the slide in front of you, look down the bottom there, you'll see we've mentioned the Verkada attack, where it exposed more than 150,000 CCTV cameras for an attack against them. Next slide, please, Marcus. And I said the word complexity a few seconds ago. Well, have a look at that. 1 trillion IoT devices are expected by 2025, and most security teams have zero visibility of them. 4G right now can accommodate about 6,000 IoT devices in a square kilometer. With 5G, we're talking about 1 million. Now, I live in a country where we use the metric system, and I can physically see a square kilometer in my mind. Just imagine where every step I take will be the crunch of an IoT device under my feet. The other issue there with that complexity is that zero visibility. It's been a problem for security teams for many, many years now in order to try to find adequate visibility of what is on the network, what is inside the digital infrastructure, where is it, who's using it, what's going on, which will become worse with 5G, will become worse once attackers start using AI. And then we have the complexity of all these devices, these internet devices now on our digital infrastructure. And with that visibility problem comes issues such as the security team suddenly discovers there's been 3,000 new IP connected devices suddenly joined the network, simply because buildings management never told them that they got a really sweet deal on internet connected light bulbs and installed them without ever actually thinking what the impact would be on the network. And then all of a sudden, pow, 3,000 new connected devices have just suddenly appeared on that network. Next slide, please, Marcus. So it's very difficult to use or find security tools that are specific to IoT. And most IoT is rushed to market with profitability in mind. Security is too often an afterthought in the manufacturing process. There's a few other issues as well. You cannot install an agent or software IoT devices. I'll just show you that now. Internet connected light bulb, antivirus software. So therefore, most security tools are built around IoT devices. Legacy technologies such as firewalls can only protect against known attacks with these devices, and vulnerability scanners detect known exploits and misconfigurations. But attackers are growing increasingly innovative and novel when it comes to launching IoT attacks. The Verkada hack that we spoke before serves as the latest case in point. IT devices are too often a blind spot for organizations when it comes to security, and no human security team can now manually track and secure these new digital environments. The risk is inherent and must be managed by continuous monitoring and real-time response. That's why we're seeing a growing number of organizations around the world turning to artificial intelligence to not only detect but autonomously respond to emerging attacks across these dynamic environments. Based on a normal understanding of behaviors across the digital environment, AI is crucial for detecting the unknown and never before seen attacks when it comes to IoT. Now, I'm just going to go through an example now. Next slide, please. So this one is a Mirai malware, and this was just recently where our AI, our Darktrace AI, detected an attack, excuse me, targeting an internet-connected camera commonly used in CCTV surveillance. This attack is a variant of the Mirai malware, and that's quite an old threat that is used to target IoT devices. Mirai was first discovered in 2016, and what it does is it continually scans the internet for the IP addresses of vulnerable devices in the Internet of Things, and then turns these devices into bots that can be used as part of botnets for large-scale network attacks. So imagine those 3,000 internet-connected light bulbs I just spoke about. By drawing on a bespoke evolving understanding of what is normal for the network, Darktrace caught each stage in this attack's life scale. Now, interestingly, because this company was still conducting their 30-day proof of value, Antigena, that's the name of our autonomous response product, and Mark is going to say a little bit more about that in a second. Antigena was not in active mode, and the attack continued past the point of initial compromise. Now, had Antigena been in active mode, the attack would not have advanced past the initial compromise. Now, having said that, I just want to go in a little bit more depth about the attack itself. At the time of the initial breach, this specific botnet's infrastructure was not yet known to open source intelligence. Darktrace, however, detected an executable download from a location not previously visited by the network. After the first anomalous executable download, another one was downloaded approximately 20 minutes later. The malware then reached out to multiple IP addresses that were statistically rare for the networks. By that, I mean no one or no thing in the network had ever contacted these IP addresses before. Specifically, the compromised device began transferring large amounts of data to an IP address in China. Now, Darktrace, by leveraging machine learning algorithms in a protocol-agnostic capacity, analyzed this device's transfers within the context of a continuously evolving understanding of what is normal both for the device and for the wider organization. It was therefore able to immediately flag all of these transfers as unusual. Now, this activity was fully investigated and reported on by Darktrace's cyber AI analyst. The suspicious file download, the unusual repeated connections, and the unusual external data transfer were all presented as unexpected events that called for further investigation. The destination IP of the suspicious download itself was determined to have 100% hostname rarity relative to what is normal for the organization. Moreover, the hash of the file revealed that it was a well-known file related to the Mirai botnet. However, with no antivirus or other security system defending the IoT camera, this had gone undetected. Now, interestingly, the client saw no indicators of this activity beyond a slightly sluggish network. This change in network activity was only explained after being identified by Darktrace's AI. Once the client was promptly notified, the compromise was de-escalated, and discovering that it was a DVR security camera, the client took the device offline. Now, as I said before, the customer was still concluding their trial deployment at the time, and Antigena, our autonomous response technology, was not in full autonomous mode. Had it been so, it would have responded with a two-tiered action to prevent the device from communicating with the malicious endpoint. Cutting the compromised connection before the attack had actually gained its foothold. Now, having said that, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Marcus. Marcus, over to you.
So Dave has done an outstanding job of talking about threat as well as talking about complexity. And those things really play into each other and the importance of and where the artificial intelligence is probably the greatest enabler. And that's visibility and understanding. And it's that application of a self-learning AI that goes out and learns business in order to stop threat. It doesn't need to try and learn or predict threat. By understanding business operations, it ensures business survival and business resilience. And I think when we think about artificial intelligence. It's really important to understand what are the different aspects that are being leveraged, right? Where is that best application of self-learning and how strong it can be in terms of enforcing that defensive superiority that one can get by understanding normal, as Dave mentioned it. Because when we're talking about IoT, how many of those things can immediately show up on the environment that if you don't have the right visibility and current level of situational awareness and understanding, how much of that quickly becomes a blind spot. In fact, in almost every deployment that Darktrace does, we ask, how many devices do you think should we anticipate we're going to see on the environment? And we often see between 10 and 20% more. And that is almost entirely those IoT devices, those unexpected surprises that your security team, in not being able to see them or understand them and be able to monitor them, that's all vulnerability. Not to mention the number of times I found Raspberry Pi devices named Raspberry Pi that the security team had no idea they were there, and they absolutely were not within the compliance requirements of that industry. So that's self-learning, that's situational awareness in real time of what's coming on and off the environment, and alerting against the new, the anomalous, the malicious is critical to beating the way that attackers are moving today, and increasingly and expanding that threat as we become more dependent on IoT devices. So we talk about visibility and understanding, but equal in its importance isn't just to be able to alert against that new IoT device or understand when it deviates from its normal business operations, but being able to move at machine speed to stop that device from taking any additional malicious action, to quarantine it in a way that doesn't allow it to pivot into encrypting files, stealing intellectual property, stealing sensitive data, and understanding and being able to quarantine it in a way that ensures business resilience, right? Because I'm taking that understanding of business operations and where I'm focused at the most granular level of what's happening within that business environment, that digital environment network. And then I'm simply enforcing that day-to-day, minute-to-minute, second-to-millisecond activity, and then I'm quarantining the malicious and the anomaly. I'm ensuring business operations, absolutely not disrupting, right? Where we've taken autonomous response, where Darktrace has moved autonomous response in its many years of being around, we are now incredibly surgical and dynamic in where we respond, how we respond, ensuring normal so that every security team is arriving at an incident that has been quarantined for evaluation, not damage control, incident response, all hands on deck. And this is critical time that the security team is saving, but it's also critical resilience for that business operation moving forward. And I think when we think about IoT, we can come into the industrial, we're going to come into the network side of things, a lot of vulnerability therein, but that's the only place where that lies. And you really need something that not only is a platform, but is a value enabler, right? A value generator through integrations with things like SaaS platforms, with things like the firewall, things like in the cloud, right? In your email, bringing and taking value across your entire security ecosystem. I don't like the idea of a security tool stack of things being layered, right? And it needs to be greater than the sum of its parts. It needs to be bringing and taking and giving value across the entire security ecosystem. This ensures that your security dollar is going farther. Your security team, both human and machine, are working more efficiently and more effectively. And your defense is not only more robust, but is superior to the attacker. So as we think about bringing things down, we think where things have shifted over the last year or so, we think about IoT, but there's also that critical endpoint. Increasingly, that endpoint and the graying of or the disappearance of the perimeter, that endpoint and what IoT devices might be out there near the endpoint or might be facilitated out by the endpoint really starts to play an increasing role. And it is probably the area where we pivoted our own R&D most successfully over the last year, and that is bringing a client sensor, an endpoint capability, so that now I'm bringing in that telemetry, I'm bringing in that intelligence to do the cyber AI analyst, to understand how it's interacting with IoT, right? To really push the limits of understanding and visibility. Because again, that is the key cornerstone to then have an investigation, to then have the response in order to disrupt the attack, right? It is less about me knowing that there's a vulnerability and more about me disrupting any actor that's going to take a malicious event within the environment, be it insider threat, supply chain a la SolarWinds, piggybacking on top of an IoT device like I'm about to show in the use case. All of these things need to be brought together through both an understanding and a capability to respond through the application of artificial intelligence. So now let's think about that slow and low attack, right? As Dave talked about, Mariah, slow and low of a smart locker. I think we all know about all the different IoT that could be sitting within the environments. I already talked about that 10 to 20% increase, right? That's smart lockers, that's smart devices, conference rooms, all of those things bringing in a lot of threat landscape. So here you have a smart locker at an amusement park. I think we all can know what amusement parks are trying to do and why they might want to have smart lockers. We've all been to one where you put your backpack in, you put your knapsack in, and go on your merry way, only to have it be there later. And maybe you want to unlock it via, any number of ways. So we can all, that smart locker being there. So you had this IoT device that was calling out to its third-party supplier, for updates, for whatever, on a periodic basis every day. Of course, unfortunately, it was doing it in an unencrypted channel. Attackers got, identified to it, paid attention to it, and then were able to hijack that and compromise one of the lockers. The reason when this one got so scary, or we thought it was really a sophisticated attacker, was the amount of reconnaissance that then started to happen, right? Which we were able to see very quickly within the user interface, and eventually able to defend against so that no information or data was lost. But the attackers were intending to remove the data in the same general increments, very small amounts of data, and same timing that the locker had historically moved data, right? They were actually attempting to pattern normal so that it would defeat, the human watching or many of the other type of network detection capabilities. But there were a number of deviations in terms of slight and very small changes in activity, file type, and file size that Darktrace was able to alert against, right? And this is one of those sophisticated attackers that it almost would have, or events that it would have been truly unfair to expect the human to have seen minor deviations within normal. But the AI, because of how granular it is and how it looks at it and brings in new telemetry, was able to not only alert against it, but able to take action against it and block the data transfer, and nothing left the environment, nothing was encrypted, and ensuring business resilience and business operations beyond the event. So it could have been fairly, I don't want to say catastrophic, but certainly concerning, that would have taken any number of security team offline in order to address. It was already quarantined. They already can do it at their pace and their normal working behavior, potentially done by a single analyst rather than many. This is efficiency, this is security at machine speed that is enabled through the application of AI, both unsupervised and supervised, in a way that is really powerful and allows for defensive superiority and kind of turning the tide to that asymmetric nature that Dave spoke of earlier. So I want to bring Dave back, want to look at some of the great